For most of his life, Akmal believed money protected people from pain. And honestly, his life seemed to prove it. Luxury house, expensive cars, business success, beautiful wife, powerful friends. People respected him everywhere he went. Or at least that's what he thought, because success creates dangerous illusions. It makes people believe loyalty is real, when sometimes loyalty is only comfort wearing a smile. Akmal built one of the largest construction companies in the city from nothing. Years of sleepless nights, risk, pressure, sacrifice, and eventually success arrived massively. Magazines interviewed him, investors admired him, employees feared him slightly, and his wife, Medina, loved the lifestyle completely. Luxury vacations, designer clothes, private events, social status. She looked perfect beside him, elegant, beautiful, confident, the kind of couple people envy online. And maybe that was the problem. Their marriage looked perfect publicly, but privately, something important was missing. Warmth, real connection, peace. But Akmal ignored those warning signs because successful men often mistake admiration for love until life removes the money and reveals the truth underneath. The collapse began suddenly. One bad investment, then another, a business partner secretly stealing funds, lawsuits, debt, frozen accounts, investors pulling out. Within months, everything started falling apart terrifyingly fast. Akmal barely slept anymore. Phones rang constantly. Lawyers, banks, creditors, bad news every hour. The stress aged him visibly, and slowly, the people around him began changing too. Business friends disappeared first, calls unanswered, meetings canceled, promises vanished. But the most painful change came from home. Medina became colder every week. Short answers, constant irritation, distance, as if his financial failure somehow made him less attractive. One evening, Akmal returned home exhausted after another disastrous meeting. The house felt strangely quiet, too quiet. Suitcases stood near the front door. Medina stood beside them calmly, perfect makeup, cold eyes, no emotion. And suddenly, Akmal understood everything before she even spoke. "I can't live like this anymore," she said quietly. Silence filled the room instantly. Not dramatic silence, the numb kind, because deep down he already knew this moment was coming. "You're leaving?" he whispered. Medina crossed her arms slowly. "I didn't sign up for struggle." The words hit harder than any business loss ever could, because suddenly everything became clear. She loved the life, not the man. Akmal stared at her silently. Years together, memories, promises, and somehow they suddenly looked fragile, cheap even. "What about us?" he asked weakly. Medina looked away first. "There is no us anymore." Then she picked up her suitcase, walked past him, and left. Just like that. No tears, no hesitation, no looking back. And for the first time in his life, Akmal felt truly poor. Not financially, emotionally, completely alone. That night, rain fell heavily across the city. Akmal sat alone inside the dark, empty house for hours. No electricity in half the rooms anymore. No staff, no noise, only silence. The kind of silence that forces people to face themselves honestly. And somewhere deep inside, for the very first time, Akmal began understanding something terrifying. Money can buy attention, but not loyalty, not real love, not real human connection. and he was about to learn that lesson in the most painful way possible. The weeks after Medina left felt endless. Akmal's life collapsed piece by piece. The luxury house was sold first, then the cars, then the company offices. Employees disappeared quickly after salaries stopped. Investors stopped answering calls completely. And suddenly, the man once surrounded by people found himself painfully alone. Akmal rented a tiny apartment on the edge of the city. Small kitchen, old walls, weak heating. The kind of place he once drove past without noticing. Now, it was home. At first, his pride suffered more than anything else. He hated standing in lines, hated cheap clothes, hated counting money carefully before buying food. Because people who live with wealth too long forget how vulnerable ordinary life can feel. But eventually, even pride becomes exhausted, especially after enough humiliation. One rainy morning, Akmal sat silently inside a small cafe searching online for work. Any work. But every interview ended the same way. "We're sorry. Your experience is impressive, but you're overqualified." Or worse, people recognized him, the former millionaire businessman, and the pity in their eyes destroyed him slowly. That afternoon, the cafe owner approached awkwardly. "Excuse me." Akmal looked up tiredly. The older man hesitated carefully. "Our cleaning worker didn't come today." Pause. "If you want, you can help for a few hours." Akmal froze instantly. Cleaning? Months ago, he would have walked away offended, humiliated. But hunger changes people quickly, and survival silences pride. So after several painful seconds, he nodded slowly. That was the first time in his life Akmal cleaned tables for money. At first, every movement felt humiliating. People ignored him. Some customers treated him impatiently. Others barely looked at him. And suddenly, he experienced life from the side he never noticed before. Invisible, replaceable, ordinary. That realization hurt deeply, especially because he remembered how casually he once ignored workers, too. Near evening, another cleaner arrived finally. An older woman wearing simple clothes and carrying a worn bag. She looked exhausted from the rain outside, but unlike most people in the cafe, her eyes felt warm immediately, kind, calm. She noticed Akmal struggling awkwardly with cleaning supplies, then smiled gently. "First day?" she asked softly. Akmal looked embarrassed instantly. "Yes." The woman nodded knowingly. I could tell. Strangely, there was no judgment in her voice, only understanding. Her name was Zabo, widowed, working multiple cleaning jobs quietly across the city. Nothing glamorous, nothing impressive by society's standards. But over the next few days, Akmal noticed something unusual about her. Despite having so little, she carried peace, real peace. She greeted everyone kindly, shared food with younger workers, thanked people sincerely, and somehow she never complained, even while living a life much harder than his. One evening, after work, Akmal sat outside the cafe, staring silently at the rain, exhausted, defeated. Zabo quietly sat beside him, holding 2 cheap cups of tea. "You look like a man fighting himself," she said gently. Akmal laughed bitterly. "You have no idea." Zabo handed him tea calmly, then said something unexpected. sometimes life destroys pride to save the person underneath it. Akmal slowly looked at her because those words felt strangely personal, painfully personal. And for the first time in months, someone wasn't looking at him with pity or admiration or judgment, just humanity, simple humanity. And without realizing it yet, that quiet woman nobody noticed was about to change his entire life. At first, Akmal didn't understand why Zibo bothered talking to him. Most people avoided broken men, especially men who used to be powerful, because fallen success makes people uncomfortable. It reminds them how temporary everything can be. But Zibo treated him differently, normally, like his value had nothing to do with money, and strangely, that simple kindness affected him deeply. Every morning, she greeted him with the same calm smile. Every evening, she quietly shared tea during breaks, sometimes bread, sometimes homemade soup inside old plastic containers. Simple food, but somehow it tasted warmer than expensive restaurant meals ever had, because hunger changes taste, and loneliness changes the meaning of kindness. One night, after work, heavy rain flooded part of the street outside the cafe. Employees rushed home quickly, but Akmal remained standing under the small roof near the entrance silently. No umbrella, no energy, no real reason to hurry home, because the tiny apartment no longer felt like home anyway. Zibo noticed him immediately. "You'll get sick standing there," she said softly. Akmal forced a tired smile. Maybe that would simplify things. The moment the words left his mouth, he regretted them slightly. But Zibo didn't react dramatically, didn't lecture him, didn't pity him. She simply looked at him carefully for a long moment, then asked quietly, "Did losing money hurt you more, or losing the people attached to it?" The question hit him harder than expected, because deep down, he already knew the answer. The money hurt his lifestyle, but abandonment destroyed his heart. Akmal lowered his eyes slowly. "I thought people loved me," he admitted quietly. Zibo nodded gently. Sometimes people love comfort and confuse it with love. Silence. Rain continued falling around them softly, and suddenly Akmal felt exhausted in a completely different way, emotionally exhausted, because for months he carried humiliation alone, fear alone, shame alone, and now, for the first time, someone truly saw his pain, not the businessman, not the failure, the human being underneath both. That realization nearly broke him. Days passed, then weeks. Slowly, Akmal changed in small ways. He became less bitter, less angry, less obsessed with his old life, because Zibo constantly reminded him of something important without even trying. Peace and dignity are not connected to wealth. One afternoon, Akmal noticed Zibo quietly sewing her old gloves during break, the fabric nearly torn apart from years of use. "You should buy new ones," he said automatically. Zibo smiled faintly. "When I have extra money." The answer sounded so simple, so ordinary. Yet suddenly, Akmal felt ashamed, because years ago he spent more money on watches and shoes than this woman probably earned in months. And still, she seemed emotionally richer than most wealthy people he knew. That night, he couldn't stop thinking about it, about her strength, her patience, her humility. Eventually, Akmal started helping her after shifts, cleaning faster together, carrying heavy supplies, walking her safely to the bus stop late at night. At first, Zibo protested gently, "You don't need to do that." But Akmal insisted quietly, because helping her felt strangely healing, like his heart slowly remembered how to be human again. One evening, while walking through the cold streets together, Zebo suddenly asked, "Who were you before all this happened?" Akmal laughed softly. "A man everyone respected." Zebo looked at him carefully. "No." Pause. "That's not who you were." Silence. "Who were you when nobody was watching?" The question stayed inside him long after they separated that night, because for years, Akmal built success, but maybe he never truly built himself. And now, standing in the ruins of his old life, a quiet cleaning woman was teaching him things wealth never could. Months passed quietly. Not perfectly, not easily, but differently. Akmal's life no longer looked impressive from the outside. No luxury office, no expensive cars, no wealthy friends surrounding him constantly. Yet, strangely, something inside him became calmer, lighter, because for the first time in years, his life no longer depended on pretending. He worked honestly, lived simply, and slowly, he began rebuilding himself from the inside instead of the outside. Zebo remained part of that transformation naturally, not through dramatic speeches, not through romance, just quiet presence, consistency, kindness, the kind of support that asks for nothing in return. One evening, after work, Akmal sat with her outside the cafe, drinking tea again. The city lights reflected across wet streets after rain, peaceful, simple. And suddenly, Akmal realized something strange. These quiet evenings felt more genuine than most luxury dinners from his old life, because peace cannot be purchased, only felt. Meanwhile, news about Akmal slowly spread again inside business circles. Not about failure this time, about recovery, because despite everything, his intelligence never disappeared. A former client secretly offered him a small consulting project, then another, then another. Akmal worked tirelessly, not to restore pride anymore, to rebuild stability. And slowly, carefully, his life began rising again, not dramatically, but steadily. One afternoon, he arrived at a meeting wearing a clean but modest suit. Nothing expensive, nothing flashy, yet somehow he looked more confident than before. Real confidence, the kind no longer dependent on wealth. As the meeting ended, someone suddenly called his name behind him, a voice from the past. Akmal froze immediately, because he recognized it instantly. Medina. He slowly turned around, and for a second, both simply stared at each other silently. She looked exactly the same, beautiful, elegant, perfectly styled, but her eyes changed. Nervous now, uncertain, because the man standing before her was not the same man she left behind. This version felt calmer, stronger somehow, less desperate for approval. "Akmal," she said softly. He nodded politely. No anger, no bitterness. And strangely, that calmness unsettled her immediately, because she expected pain, not peace. "I heard things are improving for you," she said carefully. Akmal smiled faintly. Slowly. Medina hesitated awkwardly, then finally admitted, "I've been trying to contact you." Of course she had, because people often return when stability returns too. But this time, Akmal noticed something important immediately. Her attention appeared exactly when his life started improving again. And suddenly, the old version of him would have been grateful, desperate even. But the new version simply felt tired, not hateful, just aware. They sat together briefly inside a nearby cafe. The conversation felt strange, polite, but emotionally distant. Medina talked carefully now, kinder than before, almost soft. And Akmal realized something painful. She never spoke them this gently during his collapse, only after recovery began. That truth revealed everything. Finally, Medina reached across the table slowly. "I made mistakes too," she whispered. Akmal looked at her hand calmly, then at her eyes, and for the first time in his life, he truly saw her clearly. Not as a villain, not as evil, just someone who loved comfort more than struggle, someone emotionally weak. And strangely, that realization removed all remaining anger, because understanding people often softens resentment, but it also destroys illusion. "I hope you're happy now," Medina said quietly. Silence. Heavy silence. Because deep down, Medina understood exactly what he meant. And for the first time since leaving him, she realized something terrifying. The broken man she abandoned became someone better without her. And maybe she lost the best thing she ever had. After meeting Medina again, Akmal couldn't sleep that night. Not because he missed her. That feeling was gone now. What disturbed him was the realization of how much he had changed. Months ago, seeing Medina again would have shattered him emotionally. He would have begged, hoped, tried proving his worth again. But now, for the first time, he felt free from that need. And strangely, another person occupied his thoughts instead. Zibo, the quiet woman who stood beside him when he had absolutely nothing left to offer. No status, no money, no influence, no future. And suddenly, Akmal understood how rare that kind of loyalty truly was. Because most people only know how to love someone rising. Very few know how to love someone falling. The next morning, Akmal arrived at the cafe earlier than usual. Zibo was already cleaning tables quietly near the windows. Simple clothes, hair tied back carelessly, old gloves still slightly worn despite repairs. Nothing about her looked glamorous, yet somehow Akmal saw beauty more clearly now than he ever did before. Not surface beauty, human beauty. The kind built through patience, kindness, strength, and dignity during difficult life. "Good morning," Zibo smiled softly. Akmal smiled back automatically, and that tiny automatic smile surprised him because genuine peace had quietly returned to his life without him noticing. During break time, they sat outside again drinking tea. Cold wind moved softly through the narrow streets. People hurried past them carrying umbrellas. Ordinary evening, ordinary moment. Yet somehow, Akmal felt more alive than during expensive business parties from his old life. "You seem happier lately," Zibo observed gently. Akmal laughed softly. "I think I'm finally becoming honest with myself." Zibo looked at him curiously. "What does that mean?" Akmal thought quietly before answering. "For years, I surrounded myself with people who admired success, but I never asked whether anyone truly cared about me." Silence. Then he looked directly at her. "But you did." Zibo froze slightly, almost uncomfortable, because people unused to appreciation rarely know how to receive it. "I just treated you normally," she said quietly. "That's exactly why it mattered." Those words stayed between them heavily, warmly, and for the first time, something shifted emotionally. Small, but undeniable. Meanwhile, Akmal's business opportunities continued growing slowly. Consulting projects became partnerships. Partnerships became investments. And investors who once ignored him started returning carefully. But this time, everything felt different because Akmal no longer chased success to impress people. He chased stability, purpose, peace, and that changed the energy around him completely. One afternoon, a luxury black car stopped outside the cafe unexpectedly. Several employees looked shocked immediately because expensive cars rarely appeared in that neighborhood. A wealthy businessman stepped out, smiling warmly. Akmal, old business contact, powerful, influential. The man greeted Akmal enthusiastically in front of everyone, talking about investments, future opportunities, big projects. And suddenly, the entire cafe staff realized something shocking. The quiet cleaning worker beside them was once a very important man. Some employees immediately changed behavior, voices softer, more respectful, more careful. Akmal noticed instantly, and strangely, it disappointed him, because once again, people responded to status first, not humanity. Only Zebo remained exactly the same. No sudden admiration, no fake excitement, no changed attitude, just the same calm kindness. And that moment clarified something deep inside Akmal completely. When the businessman finally left, Akmal turned toward Zebo quietly. "You knew I used to be rich," he said. Zebo nodded softly. "I guessed." "And you never cared?" She smiled faintly. "Money changes comfort." Pause. "Not character." Akmal stared at her silently, because deep inside, he finally understood something life spent years trying to teach him. The right people love you in every season, not only during success. And suddenly, he realized he no longer feared losing money again, because now he finally knew the difference between people who loved his lifestyle and people who loved his soul. Love didn't arrive dramatically. No sudden music, no instant confession, no cinematic moment where everything became clear immediately. It arrived quietly, slowly, like sunrise, the kind people only notice after darkness already begins disappearing. At first, Akmal thought what he felt for Zabo was gratitude, respect, admiration, and honestly, part of it was. How could it not be? She stood beside him during the ugliest chapter of his life, when he was emotionally broken, financially ruined, humiliated, alone. And she never treated him like a burden, never looked down on him, never made him feel smaller. But slowly, the feeling became something deeper, something more dangerous. Because one evening, Akmal caught himself searching for her smile the moment he entered work, and that realization unsettled him completely. He noticed tiny things now. The way she quietly fixed crooked chairs without thinking. The way she shared food even when she barely had enough herself. The way exhausted people relaxed around her naturally. Because peace lived inside her. Real peace. And suddenly, Akmal understood why wealthy, powerful people often remain emotionally empty. Because peace cannot be purchased, only embodied. One cold evening, heavy snow began falling unexpectedly across the city. The cafe closed early. Employees rushed home quickly before roads worsened. But Zabo remained behind, cleaning silently as always. Akmal helped her stack chairs near the windows. Outside, snow covered the streets slowly in white silence. Beautiful, quiet. For a moment, the entire world felt paused. "You should go home before transport stops," Akmal said gently. Zabel smiled faintly. "I'm used to difficult roads." Simple sentence, but something about it hurt him unexpectedly, because suddenly he imagined her entire life, working endlessly, carrying Cain quietly, surviving alone after losing her husband years ago, never complaining, never asking for help. And something deep inside Akmal softened painfully, because for the first time, he didn't just admire her strength, he wanted to protect it. That realization frightened him slightly, because love after heartbreak feels risky, especially after betrayal. But some feelings become impossible to ignore eventually. As they stepped outside together, snow continued falling softly around them. The city looked calmer somehow, cleaner. Zabel wrapped her old scarf tighter against the cold wind. Without thinking, Akmal removed his own warm coat and gently placed it around her shoulders. Zabel immediately protested. "No, you'll freeze." Akmal smiled softly. "I've survived worse." Their eyes met quietly, longer than usual this time, and suddenly something changed between them. Not spoken, not announced, just felt deeply. The bus stop nearby was nearly empty because of the storm. Snowflakes landed softly in Zabel's hair, and for one strange, beautiful moment, Akmal saw more beauty in this tired, hard-working woman than he ever saw in luxury and perfection, because real beauty feels different, warmer, safer, more human. "You know," Zabel said softly while staring at the snow, "when life broke you, it also softened you." Akmal looked at her carefully. "Is that a good thing?" Zabel smiled gently. "The best people are usually softened by pain." Silence. Snow continued falling around them quietly, and suddenly, Akmal realized something with terrifying clarity. He loved her. Not because she rescued him, not because she stayed, not because he was lonely. He loved her because around her, he became someone he actually respected, someone calmer, kinder, more honest. And maybe that's what real love truly is. Not obsession, not excitement, not ego, just two people helping each other become better human beings. The bus finally arrived slowly through the snowstorm. Zabel stepped toward the door, then paused, turned back slightly, and smiled at him in a way she never had before. Softer, warmer, almost shy, then quietly said, "Good night, Akmal." The bus doors closed, and Akmal stood alone in the falling snow, smiling to himself for the first time in years. Because despite losing everything once, life somehow gave him something infinitely more valuable in return. Someone real. Zabel noticed the change, too. Of course she did. Women who survive difficult lives learn to notice emotions quietly. The longer Akmal stayed in her life, the more impossible it became to ignore what was growing between them. The longer conversations after work, the softer smiles, the peaceful silence they somehow shared naturally, and most dangerous of all, the feeling of emotional safety. That feeling terrified her, because safety creates attachment, and attachment creates risk. For years after her husband died, Zabel carefully protected her heart, not dramatically, quietly, by staying busy, working constantly, avoiding emotional closeness, surviving instead of living. Because grief changes people deeply, especially lonely grief. At first, people visited often after the funeral, neighbors, relatives, friends. But eventually, everyone returned to their own lives, and Zabel remained alone with bills, silence, and responsibility. That's how life works sometimes. The world pauses briefly for pain, then continues moving, leaving some people behind emotionally. So Zabel adapted, became strong, independent, careful, very careful. And now, after years of emotional distance, Akmal's presence began breaking those walls slowly, without force, without pressure, simply through kindness. One evening after work, they walked slowly through the market streets together. Snow from previous days still covered parts of the sidewalks. Streetlights reflected warmly across the wet roads. Simple, peaceful night. Akmal carried heavy grocery bags before Zabel could protest. "You always do that now," she said softly. "Do what?" "Help." Akmal smiled faintly. "Maybe I'm learning." Zabel laughed quietly, and the sound warmed him instantly, because her laughter remained rare, precious somehow. As they stopped near her apartment building, silence settled between them gently. Not awkward silence, the kind filled with unspoken emotion. Then suddenly, Akmal asked carefully, "Why didn't you ever remarry?" The question surprised her slightly. Zibo looked down for a moment before answering. Life became heavy. Pause. And eventually, I forgot how to let people close again. Those words hurt him unexpectedly, because suddenly he understood how lonely strength can become. People admire strong individuals, but rarely notice the exhaustion hidden underneath. "You deserve happiness too," Akmal said quietly. Zibo smiled sadly. "People always say that, and yet, life doesn't always give it." Akmal looked at her carefully then, really carefully, and for the first time, he saw something behind her calmness. Fear. Not fear of him, fear of hope. Because people who suffer deeply often become afraid of wanting happiness again. Wanting creates vulnerability, and vulnerability risks pain. That realization softened him even more toward her. Days later, Akmal received major news. One of his new business projects succeeded massively, bigger than expected. Investors returned fully now. Money started flowing again quickly, and suddenly the old life he lost stood within reach once more. Luxury, power, status, everything. Former business partners called constantly again. Invitations returned. Respect returned. Even Medina attempted contacting him repeatedly, but strangely, none of it excited him anymore, because success no longer felt meaningful without real human connection beside it. That evening, Akmal arrived at the cafe carrying fresh bread and warm soup for Zibo. Simple gesture, yet when she smiled seeing him, he felt richer during his millionaire years. And suddenly, he understood something terrifyingly beautiful. He no longer wanted a luxurious life. He wanted a peaceful one, with her. Meanwhile, Zibo secretly noticed another terrifying truth herself. When Akmal left each night, the world felt colder again, and that frightened her deeply, because after years of protecting her heart, she was slowly falling in love again. Everything changed quickly after Akmal's comeback, faster than even he expected. The new construction project succeeded massively. Investors returned confidently. Old business contacts suddenly remembered his number again. Meetings filled his schedule. Money returned. Power returned. Status returned. And with them, people returned too. The same people who disappeared during his collapse, now smiling again, respectful again, interested again. Akmal noticed it immediately. Of course he did, because once someone loses everything, they begin seeing people more clearly, very clearly. Former friends invited him to luxury dinners again. Business magazines requested interviews. Even social media suddenly treated him like an inspirational comeback story. But strangely, none of it satisfied him anymore, because during the months he spent broken, his definition of success changed completely, and that terrified some people around him, especially Medina. One evening, she arrived unexpectedly outside his office building, elegant as always, perfect makeup, luxury perfume, the image of the life he once thought he wanted forever. Akmal looked surprised seeing her. Medina smiled softly. "You look successful again," she said carefully. Akmal almost laughed at the sentence, because once those words would have filled him with pride. Now they only revealed how differently she still saw the world. They sat together briefly inside a nearby restaurant, luxury place, expensive lights, quiet music, exactly the kind of environment they once lived in constantly. And strangely, Akmal felt emotionally disconnected from all of it now. Medina spoke carefully during dinner, kinder than before, softer, almost loving. But Akmal noticed something important. Her warmth appeared only after stability returned, never during struggle, never during pain, never during loneliness. That truth made everything painfully simple. Finally, Medina looked at him directly and whispered, "Maybe we both made mistakes." Akmal remained silent. Then she added carefully, "We could try again." There it was, the sentence he once would have given anything to hear. And yet, he felt nothing except sadness. Not anger, not revenge, just sadness. Because deep down, he realized he no longer loved the woman sitting in front of him. He loved who he became after losing her. And more importantly, he loved someone else now. Someone real. Someone who saw value in him even when life stripped everything away. Akmal looked at Medina calmly, then finally said softly, "You loved my success." Silence. Medina's face changed immediately. Pain, embarrassment, denial. But deep down, she knew it was true too. "And maybe I loved being admired by you," Akmal admitted honestly. That wasn't real love either. The honesty hurt both of them, because sometimes relationships don't fail from hatred, they fail from illusion. Medina looked away quietly. For the first time, she truly understood she lost him forever. Not because another woman stole him, because life changed him. That night, Akmal left the restaurant feeling strangely peaceful, not triumphant, free. And suddenly, he knew exactly where he wanted to go. Not the luxury penthouse, not business meetings, not elite parties. He drove across the quiet city streets until reaching Zebo's small apartment building. Simple place, warm yellow lights glowing through old windows. Home, real home. Akmal stood outside for several seconds breathing deeply, because despite all his business victories, this moment frightened him most. Not financially, emotionally. Then, finally, he knocked softly. Zebo opened the door, wearing simple home clothes, surprised, concerned slightly. "Akmal, is everything okay?" He looked at her silently for one long moment, and suddenly, every luxury from his old life felt meaningless compared to this quiet woman standing before him. "I spent years chasing the wrong things," he whispered. Zebo's expression softened immediately. Then Akmal finally said the truth sitting inside his heart for months. "When I lost money, I thought life punished me. But now I think life was trying to save me." Tears slowly filled Zebo's eyes, because deep down, she already knew what he was about to say next. Akmal stepped closer, carefully, then whispered softly, "I don't want the old life anymore." Pause. "I want you." Silence filled the small apartment doorway. Not empty silence, beautiful silence, the kind that changes lives forever. And for the first time in many years, Zebo allowed herself to believe something dangerous again. That maybe, after enough pain, life sometimes gives people a second chance at happiness. Their life together began quietly. No luxury wedding, no expensive celebration, no giant social media announcement. Just peace, real peace. And strangely, after everything both of them survived, peace felt more valuable than excitement ever could. Akmal moved into Zebo's small apartment first, not because he had to anymore, because he wanted to. The place remained simple: tiny kitchen, old wooden table, weak heating during winter. But for the first time in many years, Akmal felt emotionally at home. Not admired, not envied. Home. At first, people around him didn't understand his decision. Former business friends looked shocked. "You could marry anyone," they said. "She's just a cleaning woman." Months earlier, Akmal might have cared about those opinions. Now, they only revealed how little some people understood about life. Because once someone experiences real loneliness, surface-level beauty stops impressing them. Money stops impressing them. Status stops impressing them. Only sincerity matters. Only peace matters. Only genuine love matters. And Zebo gave him all three without even trying. Meanwhile, Akmal changed completely as a man. Not only financially, emotionally. He still rebuilt successful businesses, still earned money, still became respected again. But this time, success no longer controlled his identity, because now he understood the difference between being wealthy and being valuable. One evening, Akmal returned home carrying groceries himself after work. Years ago, assistants handled everything for him. Now, he preferred ordinary life. The smell of soup filled the apartment warmly. Zebo stood near the stove, smiling softly as he entered. Simple moment, simple woman, simple life. And somehow, Akmal felt richer than during his millionaire years. During dinner, the electricity suddenly went out across the building. Darkness filled the apartment immediately. Zebo laughed softly. Again? Akmal laughed too. Years ago, he would have complained angrily. Now, he lit candles calmly beside her, and together they ate dinner under soft candlelight while snow fell outside the window. Beautiful, peaceful, real. No pretending, no performance, no need to impress anyone. And suddenly, Akmal realized something powerful. He spent half his life chasing luxury when all he truly wanted was emotional safety. Later that night, they sat quietly drinking tea together near the window. The city lights reflected softly across the snow outside. Zebo leaned against his shoulder peacefully, and Akmal whispered something honest. When I lost everything, I thought my life ended. Pause. But really, my real life started. Zebo smiled silently, because deep down, she understood exactly what he meant. Pain destroyed the illusion around his old life, and underneath it, he finally discovered himself. The calmer version, the kinder version, the honest version, the version capable of real love. Months later, Akmal opened a new company officially, but this time, things worked differently. Every employee received respect equally. Cleaning workers ate beside managers, security guards were treated like family. No arrogance, no superiority. Because Akmal never forgot the months when he stood invisible inside society, and he never wanted another human being to feel worthless again. One afternoon, a young employee asked him privately, "Sir, what changed you so much?" Akmal smiled quietly, then answered, "Losing the people who loved my money helped me find the person who loved my soul." That sentence stayed inside the company for years afterward, because it carried truth, the painful kind, the beautiful kind. And maybe that was the final lesson of everything. Sometimes life destroys your comfortable illusion, not to punish you, but to guide you toward something real, toward real people, real love, real peace. As snow continued falling softly outside that night, Akmal looked at Zebo beside him and realized something simple. He no longer feared losing wealth again, because now he finally possessed something money could never buy, a genuine human heart beside his own. And that was the greatest success of his life. If this story touched your heart, remember this. The people who stay beside you during your hardest moments are the people who truly belong in your life. Because money attracts attention, but pain reveals loyalty. And sometimes, losing everything is the only way to discover what truly matters. Don't forget to like and subscribe, because some stories don't just entertain us, they remind us what real love actually looks like.